The night Angela Thornton disappeared was unusually still, the kind of quiet that made every creak and rustle in the Charleston suburb feel amplified. Angela, 28, an elementary school teacher known for her warmth and dedication to her students, had left a small gathering with friends around 11 p.m., walking toward her car in the dimly lit parking lot. She never returned home. Her parents, long accustomed to her late nights, initially assumed she had simply stayed longer with friends. By morning, however, when Angela's absence became undeniable, panic seeped into their bones. The local police launched a search, but the city's humid air and the maze of alleyways and streets quickly swallowed any immediate leads. Every hour that passed made the fear more tangible, and whispers among neighbors hinted at an unease that had never before visited their quiet neighborhood. Detective Marcus Holloway was assigned to the case, his reputation built on a mix of patience, intuition, and a refusal to abandon leads, no matter how cold they grew. Initial interviews with Angela's friends revealed nothing suspicious. There were no known enemies, no unusual disputes, no clear reason for someone to want to harm her. The only clue was a faint trace of footprints near her car, partially erased by the night's rain, and a small, torn piece of fabric caught on a fence post. Marcus's instincts told him this was significant, but with such minimal evidence, the investigation quickly hit a wall. Weeks turned into months, months into years, and Angela's case faded from the news, lingering instead in police files and the hearts of those who refused to let her story end in uncertainty. Her family kept her bedroom exactly as it had been, a shrine to the life stolen, while Angela's colleagues quietly mourned the absence of their friend and mentor. Despite the stagnation, Marcus returned to the file every year, reviewing evidence with fresh eyes, questioning witnesses who might have forgotten details, and seeking connections that might have been overlooked. In 2007, a breakthrough in forensic technology allowed investigators to re-examine the torn fabric found near Angela's car. Microscopic analysis revealed traces of a synthetic fiber matching a jacket sold in a specific Charleston boutique. The store's records indicated that only a handful of customers had purchased the jacket in the months leading up to Angela's disappearance. Among them was a man named Thomas Ridley, a former acquaintance of Angela from college, whose presence in the city during that period had previously gone unnoticed. At first, Marcus hesitated. Ridley had a clean criminal record, and no one could imagine him capable of violence. But as details were cross-referenced locations, phone records, even obscure social media exchanges from the early 2000s, a pattern began to emerge. Ridley had attended gatherings where Angela had been present, and on the night of her disappearance, surveillance footage from a nearby convenience store showed a figure resembling him walking in the direction of the parking lot. Each piece, while individually inconclusive, formed a mosaic that increasingly pointed toward a hidden truth. Marcus, now more convinced than ever, requested a warrant for Ridley's residence, hoping to uncover more than the fragmented trail he had pieced together over years of painstaking investigation. Inside Ridley's home, investigators found a cluttered office filled with books, maps, and photographs, some dating back to his college years. A locked filing cabinet, once ignored as inconsequential, revealed its significance when a hidden key was discovered taped beneath a desk. Inside, officers found a series of letters, meticulously written but never sent, describing thoughts and feelings that veered toward obsession with Angela. One letter, dated the week of her disappearance, included directions to a remote area outside the city. Marcus felt a chill as he read it. The handwriting and details matched elements of the original crime scene, suggesting that Ridley had more involvement than anyone had imagined. The case, dormant for nearly 4 years, suddenly took on a sharp, urgent clarity, and the detectives felt the adrenaline of momentum. The sense that justice, long delayed, was finally within reach. Meanwhile, Angela's family remained unaware of the developments unfolding just a few miles away. Her mother, Denise Thornton, spent quiet evenings tending to Angela's garden, still hoping for news, clinging to the faint possibility that her daughter might be found alive. Her father, James, immersed himself in community outreach for missing persons, speaking at schools and local events to raise awareness and honor his daughter's memory. The letters discovered in Ridley's office, when eventually linked to him, would later shock the family, revealing the obsessive nature of someone they had never considered a threat. The realization that the crime had been so methodical, so hidden in plain sight, was both horrifying and strangely validating. It meant that Angela's disappearance had not been random, and that someone was accountable. Marcus and his team followed the directions mentioned in the letters, which led them to an abandoned cabin on the outskirts of Charleston. Overgrown vines and years of neglect concealed the structure, but inside, forensic specialists discovered remnants of personal items, some with traces of DNA that would later be pivotal. The discovery confirmed Marcus's suspicions. The crime had been meticulously planned and executed, with Ridley taking pains to obscure his involvement. This evidence, combined with witness accounts and the fiber analysis, formed a compelling case. What had once seemed like a cold trail of uncertainty now glimmered with a path to resolution. The pieces of a long-forgotten puzzle, finally starting to fit together, the investigation revealed further unsettling details. Ridley had manipulated his social circle, maintaining a facade of normalcy while carefully orchestrating movements and interactions to avoid suspicion. Colleagues recalled fleeting odd comments he had made about Angela, which now took on a sinister significance. Marcus understood that unearthing the truth after such a long period required patience, attention to the smallest details, and a willingness to confront the disturbing reality of a seemingly ordinary individual capable of extraordinary harm. The hidden letters, a record of obsession and planning, were a stark reminder that even quiet, unassuming people could harbor dangerous intentions. As the case moved toward an arrest, the community buzzed with renewed attention. Friends of Angela shared memories in local newspapers and television interviews, their voices tinged with relief, sadness, and hope. The press coverage, while respectful, highlighted the extraordinary patience of law enforcement, the role of modern forensic tools, and the determination of a family unwilling to let their daughter's case fade into obscurity. Public interest peaked when Marcus revealed that the key evidence, the hidden letters and the cabin, discovery had been overlooked in the initial investigation. The revelation created shockwaves, underscoring how even minor oversights could delay justice for years. When Ridley was finally taken into custody, he appeared calm, almost detached, as though the weight of the years had numbed his reactions. Marcus remained vigilant, aware that the arrest was only the beginning of a process that would demand meticulous preparation, both in court and in public perception. Evidence had to be airtight, witness testimonies corroborated, and the emotional narrative of Angela's life and disappearance effectively conveyed to ensure justice. For the Thornton family, Ridley's arrest was a bittersweet moment. Relief mixed with renewed pain, as decades of absence and unanswered questions surged back with clarity. The weeks following, Thomas Ridley's arrest were tense and exhausting for everyone involved, especially the Thornton family. Every day brought a flood of emotions, relief that someone was finally accountable, anger at the years lost, and an overwhelming grief that refused to dissipate. Denise Thornton spent mornings in her garden, the act of tending flowers a fragile attempt to reclaim normalcy. Each bloom reminded her of Angela's laughter, her gentle presence, and the dreams she had once shared. James Thornton, on the other hand, found himself buried in records, courtroom procedures, and endless meetings with detectives. He was determined to ensure that nothing would slip through the cracks this time, that Angela's story would finally be told accurately and fully. Detective Marcus Holloway and his team meticulously went over every scrap of evidence again, combing through the letters, fibers, and traces discovered in the abandoned cabin. The DNA extracted from items inside the cabin was sent for confirmation testing at a state lab. Each result that came back strengthened their case, confirming what Marcus had suspected for years. Ridley had been directly involved in Angela's disappearance. Yet, as they delved deeper, an unsettling realization emerged. Ridley had been careful, calculated. Small manipulations, minor diversions, and overlooked clues painted a picture of someone who had meticulously concealed his actions. Every aspect of his life, every alibi, now seemed rehearsed and deliberate, a chilling reflection of his methodical planning. The letters, initially dismissed as eccentric ramblings, were now crucial in connecting Ridley to the crime. Investigators discovered hidden annotations in the margins, subtle codes that indicated his visits to specific locations around the city during the time of Angela's disappearance. A local postal worker, interviewed years later, recalled delivering a peculiar letter with no return address to a small post office near Ridley's apartment, a piece of information that had gone unnoticed. At the time, this single memory, combined with digital footprints from early email accounts and phone records, formed a digital breadcrumb trail that confirmed Ridley's movements. The realization that these tiny details had been there all along added a bittersweet satisfaction. The case could have been solved years earlier, yet justice, however delayed, was now inevitable. The trial preparation demanded both psychological resilience and precise strategy. The prosecution focused on tying Ridley to the letters, the cabin, and the DNA evidence, while defense attorneys attempted to question the reliability of decades-old witness statements. However, the emerging narrative, the obsessive letters, the secret visits, the hidden cabin painted a coherent story that the jury could not ignore. Former friends and neighbors testified, recalling odd behaviors, fleeting mentions of Angela, and inconsistencies in Ridley's accounts of his whereabouts. These small details, once considered irrelevant, now converged into a compelling narrative. Meanwhile, Denise and James Thornton faced an emotional roller coaster. Denise attended each court session, often struggling to maintain composure as testimonies recounted the minutiae of Angela's disappearance. James, while outwardly composed, found his thoughts repeatedly returning to the night Angela vanished, to the haunting silence that had filled their home. The courtroom, however, became a stage for long-awaited recognition of Angela's life, her impact, and the grief her absence had caused. Witnesses spoke of her dedication to students, her kindness to colleagues, and her unwavering optimism. These recollections were not merely sentimental. They were crucial in humanizing the victim, emphasizing the real-life consequences of Ridley's actions. One unexpected twist during the trial shook everyone. A forensic analyst revealed that fibers discovered in the cabin matched not only the jacket, Ridley had purchased, but also a rare blend found in Angela's school classroom, suggesting she had been taken from her familiar environment rather than abducted elsewhere. This revelation intensified the narrative, confirming that Ridley's planning involved knowledge of Angela's daily routines and that her disappearance was no accident. The courtroom murmured as this detail emerged, adding a layer of shock and horror to the already tense proceedings. Outside the courtroom, the community reacted with a mixture of relief and disbelief. Local news outlets covered every twist, from the letters to the cabin discovery, emphasizing how meticulous investigation and persistence could finally deliver justice. Friends and former students of Angela gathered to offer support to the Thornton family, sharing memories and stories that reminded everyone that Angela had been more than a missing person. She had been a vital, cherished part of their lives. Marcus Holloway observed these gatherings quietly, feeling a measure of satisfaction knowing that the painstaking work of years had restored a fragment of peace to a grieving community. As the trial progressed, Ridley remained calm, almost unnervingly so. His composure contrasted sharply with the raw emotion in the courtroom, highlighting the disturbing disconnect between his actions and their consequences. Expert witnesses discussed the psychological profile that emerged from Ridley's writings and behaviors, painting a portrait of obsession, control, and meticulous forethought. The jury, listening intently, began to grasp the enormity of what had transpired and the degree to which this man had hidden his crime from the world. Each day of testimony, each new revelation, seemed to tighten the grip of justice, bringing closure ever closer. In a particularly emotional session, Angela's former students were called to speak. They recounted the lessons she had imparted, the encouragement she had given, and the small acts of kindness that had defined her presence. Their words, innocent yet profound, underscored what had been lost and why the pursuit of justice was so urgent. Denise and James listened, tears streaming, as the collective voice of those who had known Angela painted a vivid picture of a life that had been interrupted, but not erased. The courtroom, for a moment, felt less like a site of legal procedure, and more like a space of remembrance and honor. Marcus and his team continued to probe further, exploring any overlooked corners of Ridley's past. Investigators uncovered minor, seemingly insignificant connections that now took on new meaning. Old acquaintances recalling strange behavior, a pattern of unreported incidents, and even cryptic entries in personal journals. Each discovery reinforced the idea that Ridley's facade of normalcy had been carefully constructed, a chilling reminder that danger often hides behind ordinary appearances. The weight of these realizations settled heavily on Marcus, but also reaffirmed the importance of diligence, of revisiting cold cases with fresh eyes and modern techniques. The emotional intensity of the trial reached a peak when the final pieces of forensic evidence were presented. DNA from the cabin, fiber analysis, and Ridley's own letters formed an incontrovertible link to Angela's disappearance. The jury, visibly moved, began to understand the depth of premeditation, the deliberate manipulation, and the obsessive fixation that had gone unnoticed for years. For the Thornton family, this culmination was simultaneously devastating and relieving. Devastating because it laid bare the details of their daughter's last moments. Relieving because the truth was finally acknowledged, and justice was inching closer to completion. The day of the verdict arrived with a tense stillness that seemed to settle over the entire courthouse. Friends, family, former students, and neighbors packed the benches, their faces etched with anticipation and anxiety. Denise and James Thornton sat at the front, hands clasped tightly, leaning on each other for support. Years of uncertainty, sleepless nights, and quiet despair had led to this moment. Angela's story, once swallowed by time and neglect, was finally taking its place in the light. The courtroom itself seemed charged with emotion. Every whisper, every shuffle of papers, every creak of the floor amplifying the gravity of the day. As the jury filed in, the atmosphere grew heavier. The foreperson, a middle-aged woman with a calm, measured demeanor, read the charges aloud one final time. Every word echoed like a drumbeat, reinforcing the reality of Ridley's actions and the long road to justice. Ridley, seated at the defendant's table, remained eerily composed, his face betraying little emotion. The contrast between his stoicism and the raw tension in the room was almost surreal, a reminder of the chilling detachment that had allowed him to evade detection for so long. The foreperson began delivering the verdict, each word falling like a hammer strike. "We, the jury, find the defendant guilty." A collective exhale swept through the room, followed by the restrained sobs of Denise and James. Relief mingled with grief, creating an emotional storm that neither parent could contain. The judge's gavel struck, punctuating the end of a chapter that had begun nearly 2 decades earlier with silence, uncertainty, and unanswered questions. For Marcus Holloway and his team, the verdict was validation not just of the meticulous investigative work, but of the unyielding belief that justice, no matter how delayed, could still prevail. As Ridley was led away in handcuffs, murmurs filled the courtroom. Neighbors and former students exchanged quiet words, some hugging, others wiping tears from their eyes. It was a moment of collective catharsis, a small-town acknowledgement that the darkness that had lingered for so long was finally dissipating. Outside the courthouse, news crews captured the raw emotions of the community. Denise and James gave brief statements, their voices steady despite the torrent of feelings beneath. "This doesn't bring Angela back," Denise said softly, "but it finally gives us the truth, and that truth matters." The investigation didn't end with the trial. Marcus and his team worked tirelessly to ensure that every loose end was addressed, every overlooked clue revisited. New leads, connections, and corroborating testimonies were documented, forming a comprehensive archive that would preserve Angela's story and aid in any future investigations. The letters, once dismissed as eccentricities, were carefully analyzed, catalogued, and stored as a permanent record of Ridley's obsessive behavior. Every fiber, every trace, every detail became a testament to the painstaking dedication required to unravel a mystery buried by time. In the weeks following the verdict, the Thornton family began the slow process of healing. Denise returned to her garden, finding solace in the rhythm of planting and tending. Each bloom, each sprouting seed, became a symbol of resilience and continuity. James immersed himself in community outreach, speaking to local groups about the importance of vigilance, the power of forensic science, and the enduring value of persistence. Together, they honored Angela's memory, transforming grief into action and remembrance. The community, too, felt the ripples of closure. Former students held memorial gatherings, local organizations dedicated scholarships in Angela's name, and small acts of remembrance appeared throughout the town. The narrative of fear and uncertainty that had once overshadowed everyday life gradually gave way to stories of resilience, collective healing, and the reaffirmation that justice, no matter how delayed, had the power to restore faith in humanity. Marcus reflected on the case with a mixture of pride and humility. It had been one of the most challenging investigations of his career, filled with moments of frustration, dead ends, and nearly missed opportunities. Yet every painstaking step, every revisited clue, every sleepless night had culminated in a resolution that brought solace to a grieving family and restored a measure of peace to the community. He often thought about the small details, the overlooked fiber, the hidden annotation, the fleeting memory of a postal worker, and marveled at how these fragments, once insignificant, had coalesced into the truth. Even years later, the impact of Angela Thornton's story remained vivid in the minds of those who had lived through it. The letters she inspired, the lives she touched, and the relentless pursuit of justice served as reminders that no case, no matter how cold, was beyond hope. The arrest and conviction of Thomas Ridley became a benchmark for future investigations, demonstrating how advances in forensic science, combined with dogged determination, could solve mysteries long thought unsolvable. For Denise and James, the journey was far from over. While nothing could erase the void left by Angela's absence, they found strength in sharing her story, advocating for victims' rights, and mentoring those who had faced similar tragedies. Their home, once filled with quiet sorrow, gradually became a space of remembrance and hope, where memories of Angela were honored not in silence but through actions that celebrated her life and the enduring legacy of love and perseverance. The case left an indelible mark on every investigator, every community member, and every life touched by Angela's story. It reminded all who heard it that even in the shadow of decades-old uncertainty, the pursuit of truth was relentless and unyielding. And above all, it reaffirmed a simple yet profound truth, that justice, no matter how delayed, has the power to heal, to illuminate, and to restore a measure of peace to those left behind. The story of Angela Thornton, once a quiet town's darkest mystery, had transformed into a testament of resilience, the triumph of meticulous investigation, and the unwavering belief that no secret remains buried forever. As the town slowly returned to its rhythms, the echoes of the past lingered, not as a haunting reminder, but as a Bacona story of courage, persistence, and the ultimate restoration of justice. The Thornton family, the investigators, and the community knew one thing with certainty: Angela's name would never be forgotten, and the truth of her story would endure, illuminating the path for those who would continue the relentless pursuit of justice in the years to come.